I think this was my favorite episode of the series. I'm not going to say of the season, because as of right now, there's no official word of a season 2. I don't think. Anyway, episode 8, The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord, was full of really great tension, multiple chases, the Night Sisters raising an army of the undead that are just a continuous wall of opponents for our heroes to push through, various battles, Thrawn's tactical decisions. The episode had, in my opinion, probably the best tension in the series, not necessarily when it comes to action. I still feel like a lot of the action, even the lightsaber stuff, is weightless. You know, it feels like people are swinging at air. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, I felt the episode had some really great tension. You know, we didn't really know where things were going to go. Characters could have died, so there was a lot of what ifs and possibilities going into this. The relationship between Ahsoka and Sabine is bandaged. They kind of acknowledge their faults and acknowledge how they could have been better. The relationship of master and apprentice is fleshed out in a very satisfying conclusion to me. Now, hear me out. This is not just a criticism of this show. It's not even really a criticism. It's just a personal brain block that I have. But the witches and magic and all of that stuff, I know people love it. But it's always been a little out there and goofy for me. I know there's room for all sorts of stuff in Star Wars, and I always appreciate when things get weird and different, but they've always felt a little out of place. To me. I just chalk it up to being an old original trilogy fan who sometimes sees some of that stuff as a little silly. Forgive me, I'm just being honest. But you know, I've mellowed out on a lot of that stuff over the past decade or so. This isn't the first time that we've seen, you know, the witches and all that stuff, but they're interesting at times. Overall, I don't know what else to say about that. The ending was fantastic. I didn't know what to expect. I fully kind of predicted that everyone would get home and everything would be a-okay. Just a nice bow wrapped on this, you know, this series. And while everyone other than Morgan, I suppose, survived, they're left in quite a predicament. I love how Ahsoka basically said they're right where they should be. They're right where they belong. It's a very optimistic and bright side look at their situation, but having Sabine and Ahsoka and even Baylan and Shin all marooned in this galaxy offers up some really interesting future storytelling. Who knows what will come of them? And in all honesty, I don't really think it needs to be further explained. I know we Star Wars fans always want everything further detailed and explained, but this is a solid send-off for these characters if we never see them again. I mean, we'll definitely see them again. I have no delusions that we won't. But if this is where Ahsoka and Sabine's story in Star Wars concludes, well, it's kinda neat to have them in this completely other galaxy on their own with Hu Yang and some newfound friends and maybe a couple of enemies they'll ration with. And it's fun to have that mystery of what is going on there in this complete other galaxy. I hope it doesn't become so easy to travel between galaxies, because this intergalactic island that they found themselves on, this impassable, impossibly massive distance, it's neat. I like it. I like it as a send-off. It sends them off without death. It sends them off in a very unique way. Kind of a riding off into the sunset in a depressing way, if that makes sense. I don't know. I like it. I like when sometimes things are vague and left up to the imagination. We didn't see a lot of Baylan in this episode, only at the end. We didn't see a lot of Shin, again, only at the end. And I'm curious, because of real-world circumstances surrounding the death of Ray Stevenson, if they left a lot of his footage on the cutting room floor to use in a future season or something like that. But again, is a second season happening? There's no official word. I mean, I would think so. But again, until the official word comes out, I'm just chalking this up as a little mini-series. I was pleasantly surprised by the Ahsoka show. Not blown away. The show didn't floor me. The show was kind of middle of the road overall to me, with some really great moments peppered in here and there. I'm guessing that Thrawn and the witches will play a role in the Emperor's return as seen in The Rise of Skywalker. I'm assuming that that big question will be answered in the future in some form or fashion. I know Dave Filoni is working on a film, so maybe that'll be a tie-in. Maybe it'll play as an explanation for the Final Order and the Emperor and all that stuff. Who knows? The action in the Ahsoka show, as I said earlier, wasn't all that great to me. Even this episode, a lot of it felt very weightless, tensionless at times. Even the lightsaber fights, again, just felt like people swinging at air. But it did have moments that paid off. This is the Star Wars show that I'm really torn about. I mean, you have things like Andor, which I'm a huge fan of, and then you have things like Boba Fett and Kenobi that it's kind of forgettable. But Ahsoka's kind of in the middle. I didn't love it, I didn't dislike it, it's kind of right in the middle for me. Low lows and high highs. But overall, I enjoyed my time with Ahsoka. I think it's neat for maybe folks who are not familiar with these characters, like Thrawn or even the witches, to be introduced to new sides of Star Wars that they might have not ever known about. For example, I work with a guy who is a huge Star Wars fan. He goes to Galaxy's Edge all the time, watches the movies with his kids all the time. He's around my age. And I was talking to him about Ahsoka last week, and he was like, yeah, I didn't know there were witches and magic and stuff in Star Wars. It's kind of weird. And he said he doesn't know anything about Thrawn. And when Thrawn was revealed, this guy was super underwhelmed. So it's interesting to see, he's a big Star Wars fan. He knows a shitload about the movies, but he's never really dove into the books or the shows and stuff like that, or the cartoons at least. So I'm curious to talk to him about this episode and see what he thought about it and kind of the overall picture of Ahsoka. Because it's important to get the perspective of Uber fans who know everything and all the intimate details and the connections and whatnot. But it's also important to find out what fans who don't gobble up everything think as well. Because they're still fans. If you just watch the movies, you're still a fan, and your opinion matters. And it's important to kind of feel out both sides of the spectrum because you can learn a lot about how a show is doing by both hearing the opinions of those in the know and those who are not as in the know. Does that make sense? Anyway, Ahsoka was fun. It had its moments. This episode was pretty solid. And I'll be talking about it in some streams moving forward. But yeah, let me know what you thought in the comment section below. HelloGreedo, out.